Man, you're going to have fun listening to this. I'm the oldest sibling. I have one younger brother. I can't recall him turning me on to a lot of music. I didn't really have any kind of, older brother or just sort of like older person taking me under their wing and showing me music when I was young. I was pretty much like watching MTV when I was a kid, around like 10, 11, 12, and like getting into whatever kind of they were playing. I liked, of course, Green Day and The Offspring and Rage Against the Machine. And I think the only artist that I liked from that time that still, that I still enjoy and still have music from is Rage Against the Machine. That Evil Empire album was the first I bought from them. I had it on cassette, and I still love that thing. My parents were divorced, and I lived with my mom. And my dad, we kind of went back and forth from one house to the other. And my dad always lived in Prospect, but my mom moved around a lot. So, when I was a kid, I lived in West Haven. Then for a while, I lived in Naugatuck and then Bristol. And then eventually, I came here to Wolcott, Connecticut, and pretty much have been living here ever since. But I do plan to move again myself this summer. Going to be not this summer, but this fall or winter. Going to be moving in with the girlfriend of 2 years. And so like MTV was like my early musical influence, and the radio, whatever was on the radio. I remember me and my mom were intensely into the radio, and I remember at the time she was into a lot of female singer-songwriters, so like I was listening to stuff like, she was always playing like stuff like Jewel in the car and like Melissa Etheridge, and I remember there was this one cassette that we listened to, and it was like nothing but people covering songs that Elvis had popularized. It was just like Elvis covers. That's how it was marketed. It was just Elvis covers, and we loved that cassette. I remember we listened to that all the time in the car. And man, once I got into high school, I think you know what's funny? Like when I was getting into music, when I was into Rage Against the Machine and stuff, in the 90s, late 90s, I had gotten into Weird Al Yankovic, and I basically kind of, and I remember vividly thinking this when I was a kid, I ruined music for myself because music had become kind of like a joke to me, because music was just like funny, this was hilarious. And then I remember that was when he came out with Bad Hair Day, and then I remember for a while I just like wasn't into music that much. Not that I hated music, but I stopped following it. I wasn't following it anymore. And I remember my mom had gotten remarried at some point, and I had two stepsisters at the time, one who was my age and one who was older, who were living with us. And I remember that was around that time they were doing those like, you can get 15 CDs for a penny. And I remember we were kind of like doing that and, getting some CDs, and they were like, well, what kind of music do you like? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no clue how I did it or how it happened, but I guess I eventually got back into music again in high school. And I think partially it was through the crowd I was hanging out with, and it was partially due to, that CD clearinghouse thing, and also, getting my first little CD Walkman, and just, trying to follow music on the radio again. But I was listening to a lot of nu metal. I somehow had gotten into Marilyn Manson and Korn and Limp Bizkit, and I was also into Fear Factory, whose early stuff isn't that bad if you go and check it out. And, like Coal Chamber and System of a Down. I remember that System of a Down record, that first record. That was so badass when I was a kid, and like I remember I saw them live too. Oh, I was into Slipknot too. I was into the Slipknot, and but just a lot of new metal and stuff like that. And a good friend of mine who still lives in Connecticut, I'm in touch with him to this day. I'm still great friends with him. His name is Derek Youngquist, and he got me into punk music, which basically ruined the rest of my life. I was probably going to become an accountant, but then he ruined my life by showing me punk music. And I remember he burnt me this CD. It had Black Flag on it, had Dead Kennedys on it, and it had Ramones on it, and it had like a lot of 60s rock too. It had The Who on it, because I remember one day he was going through my CD booklet, and to this very day I have a special rule where if you see a CD booklet, just turn around, because there's nothing good in it. It's a CD booklet. There's not going to be anything good in it. But anyway, he had burned me all this stuff, and I remember at first I hated it. I thought it was like terrible. All the bands sounded weird. None of it was heavy. But then I remember there was this one track. It was a Dead Kennedys track. It was off the I think it was off In God We Trust Incorporated. We've Got a Bigger Problem Now. Still remember the title, and I'm terrible with song titles. And which I remember was a reworking of California Uber Alles, but like more specifically in reference to Ronald Reagan, as opposed to just the governor of California. And so then I was really into that track. I thought that track was so extreme, and it was just like, had a really great mix. Dead Kennedys just had some of the best production out of so many punk bands out there. Especially when, of course the production on their first album is okay. It's grimy, it's good. But like, the production on Frankenchrist, and the production on In God We Trust, and the production on especially Plastic Surgery Disasters, those are like loud albums, intense as hell. And I remember I just liked the sound of that track. It was sort of that nice middle ground between the really heavy, saturated nu metal production I was listening to now, but, it was in this punk style. It was fast, it was aggressive, it had that speed, it had that, kind of playing it loose kind of feel to it. It wasn't so plastic sounding. And I remember from that, I kind of went back and I started, little by little enjoying the other songs on the album. And, from there on in, I just pretty much took a lot of Derek's musical recommendations very seriously throughout high school. I completely, detested metal after that, and I was just like, total punks! And, of course, I was still making bad musical decisions, but I was taking a lot of his advice and a lot of his recommendations seriously. And then when I got into college, I was pretty much exploring things on my own terms, and really getting into stuff like Tom Waits. But yeah, I did kind of have a musical mentor, and it was in that short period during high school. And pretty much, everything after that, I really didn't have many more musical mentors, just because, and not like I necessarily needed it, but it was just because I had already had the seed in my head planted that, okay, underground music, interesting, if it underground, look for it, look it up, see what it is, and that was pretty much that, no matter what the genre or the style was, if there was like an underground version of it, or just like, some indie version of it, then I was going to try it out, and just see kind of what it had to offer. And that kind of went from rock to electronic to hip hop music for me, and just like, just kind of grew from there.